The day Jesus helped a poor man and changed his life forever. Have you ever felt so poor that you started believing you were invisible? Not just poor in money, but poor in hope, poor in confidence, poor in love, and poor in faith. Imagine walking through a crowded city, thousands of people passing you, everyone looking at their phones, everyone rushing to work, everyone busy with their own problems, but no one stopping to look at you. Now imagine sitting on a cold street, with nothing in your hands, nothing in your pockets, and no one left to call. That was the life of a poor man named Eli. And one day, when Eli had completely lost hope, he met a man who changed everything. A man who didn't look at his clothes. A man who didn't care about his past. A man who didn't ask how much money he had. That man was Jesus Christ. And what happened next is a story about compassion, faith, and the kind of love that can change a human life forever. Before we begin, if you believe that Jesus still sees the people the world ignores, take a moment and stay until the end, because this story may remind you that you are never truly alone. Visual: a poor man sitting alone on a city street during a cold evening. Narrator: Eli was not always poor. Years earlier, he had a small home, a loving wife, and a little daughter named Sarah. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Every morning, Eli worked with his hands. He carried heavy boxes. He repaired old buildings. He worked under the hot sun, and sometimes in the freezing cold. He wasn't rich, but he was proud, because every night, he came home with food for his family. Then one day, everything changed. Eli was working at a construction site when an accident happened. He fell from a high platform. His body was badly injured, and for months, he could not work. The bills began to pile up. The rent became impossible to pay, and slowly, Eli lost everything: his home, his job, and eventually, his wife. She left with their daughter, not because she hated him, but because she was afraid. Afraid of becoming homeless. Afraid of not being able to feed Sarah. Eli understood, but understanding didn't make it hurt any less. Every night, he slept under a bridge. He used an old blanket to protect himself from the cold. And every morning, he woke up hoping someone would help him. But most people didn't even look. Some people walked past him. Some people moved to the other side of the street. And a few people whispered, "Why doesn't he just get a job?" But they didn't know Eli's story. They didn't know his pain. They only saw a poor man. And sometimes, that's the saddest thing about the world. People judge what they see, without ever asking what happened. Narrator: one evening, Eli had not eaten all day. He walked through the streets, looking for anything. A piece of food, a few coins, even a kind word. But the city was cold, and the people were busy. Finally, an old woman gave him a small piece of bread. It was all she had. Eli stared at it. He was starving. But then, he saw a little boy sitting nearby. The boy looked hungry. Eli looked at the bread. Then he looked at the child. And even though his stomach was empty, Eli broke the bread in half. He gave one piece to the boy. The child smiled. "Thank you," the boy said. Eli smiled back. But after the child left, Eli sat alone. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "God, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I've tried to be good. I've tried to be strong, but I'm tired." Tears slowly ran down his face. Then Eli said something that many people have said in their darkest moments. "God, if you can hear me, please Don't let me be invisible anymore. Crowd walking through a street. Jesus appearing in the distance. The next morning, something unusual happened. Eli was sitting near a busy street. The crowd was larger than usual. People were talking. Some were excited. Others were trying to get closer to a man walking through the city. Eli didn't know what was happening. He only knew the crowd was loud. Then he heard someone say, "Jesus is here." Eli slowly lifted his head. Jesus. The name was familiar. He had heard stories. People said Jesus healed the sick. People said he gave hope to the broken. People said he loved people that others rejected. But Eli had heard many promises in his life, and most of them were empty. So he looked down again. He didn't want to get his hopes up. The crowd moved closer, and then Jesus stopped. Everyone expected Jesus to keep walking, but he didn't. He looked around, and his eyes found Eli. Eli froze. For the first time in a long time, someone was actually looking at him. Not at his dirty clothes. Not at his broken shoes. Not at the place where he slept. Jesus looked directly at him. And then, Jesus began walking toward him. Visual. Jesus kneeling beside Eli. Narrator. The crowd became silent. Jesus walked past the rich people, past the important people, past the ones who were shouting his name, and he stopped in front of Eli. Then Jesus knelt down, right there, on the dirty street. Eli looked at him in shock. Jesus asked, "My friend, what do you want me to do for you?" Eli didn't answer. He had expected Jesus to ask him about his past. He expected judgment. He expected someone to say, "You should have worked harder. You should have made better choices. You should have tried harder." But Jesus asked a simple question. "What do you want me to do for you?" Eli's lips began to shake. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know." Jesus looked at him with compassion. Eli continued, "I used to know what I wanted. I wanted a home. I wanted to provide for my family. I wanted to be a good father. But now," he looked down, "now, just want to feel like a human being again." The crowd was completely silent. Then Jesus placed his hand on Eli's shoulder, and Jesus said, "You are not invisible." Eli looked up. Jesus continued, "You are not forgotten, and you are not worthless." Eli began to cry, not because someone gave him money, not because someone promised him a new life, but because, for the first time in years, someone had reminded him of his value. Narrator. Jesus reached out his hand. Eli stared at it. Then slowly, he took Jesus' hand. Jesus helped him stand. The crowd watched. Some people were confused. They were expecting a miracle, maybe a healing, maybe something dramatic. But Jesus did something different. He turned to the crowd and said, "Whoever has 2 coats, give one to the person who has none." The crowd became quiet. "Help him." The man had expensive clothes. Then, Jesus looked at a wealthy man, standing nearby. He had more than enough. Jesus said. The man looked uncomfortable. At first, he looked away, but Jesus didn't say anything else. He simply looked at him, and slowly, the man removed his coat. He gave it to Eli. Then another person gave Eli food. Another person gave him shoes. Someone else offered him a place to sleep. And suddenly, the man who had been invisible was surrounded by people, but Eli didn't know what to say. He looked at Jesus and whispered, "Why?" Jesus smiled. "Because love is not something you only talk about. Love is something you do." Eli sitting with Jesus beside a small fire. That evening, Eli sat beside Jesus. The city had become quiet. The fire burned softly. Eli was wearing clean clothes. He had eaten. He had a warm place to sleep, but his heart was still heavy. After a long silence, Eli asked Jesus, "Do you think my family will ever forgive me?" Jesus looked at him. Eli continued, "My daughter, I don't even know if she remembers me." He pulled a small photograph from his pocket. It was old. The picture showed a little girl smiling. Eli held it tightly. "I failed her." Jesus was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Eli, your past may explain your pain, but it does not have to decide your future." Eli looked at Jesus. Jesus continued, "You may have lost many things, but you have not lost the ability to love. And as long as you can love, your story is not over." Those words stayed in Eli's heart. Your story is not over. Maybe someone watching this video needs to hear that too. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe you lost someone you love. Maybe your family walked away. Maybe you made mistakes. Maybe you feel like the world has already decided who you are. But listen carefully. Your story is not over. Narrator. The next morning, Eli made a decision. He was going to find his daughter. He was afraid. He didn't know what would happen, but he remembered Jesus' words. Your story is not over. So Eli began walking. Day after day, he searched. He asked questions. He worked small jobs. He carried boxes. He cleaned buildings. He did whatever work he could find. And every night, he prayed, "Jesus, please give me the strength to keep going." Months passed. Then one day, Eli finally found the town where his daughter lived. His heart began beating faster. He stood outside a small house. His hands were shaking. He almost walked away. He thought, "What if she doesn't want to see me? What if she hates me?" Then Eli remembered Jesus, and he knocked on the door. A woman opened the door. It was Eli's wife. She looked at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Eli said, "I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know, I never stopped loving you." His wife began to cry. Then a young woman appeared behind her. Eli turned, and he saw Sarah. His little girl was now a teenager. Eli could barely breathe. Sarah stared at him. Then she whispered, "Dad?" Eli broke down. He fell to his knees. Sarah ran toward him and hugged him. Eli held his daughter tightly, and he cried. He cried for the years he had missed. He cried for the nights under the bridge. He cried for the days he believed he was forgotten. But most of all, he cried because he finally understood something. Jesus had not only helped him survive, Jesus had helped him believe in life again. Visual. Eli helping poor people in the city. Narrator. Years later, Eli never forgot the day he met Jesus. He worked hard, he rebuilt his life, and he started a small shelter for people who had nowhere to go. Every night, he served food, he gave clothes, and he listened to people. One evening, a young man came to the shelter. He was dirty, hungry, and completely broken. Eli looked at him, and he saw himself. The young man said, "No one cares about me." Eli slowly sat beside him. Then he said, "I know what that feels like." The young man looked up. Eli smiled. "You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. And you are not worthless." The young man began to cry, and Eli placed his hand on his shoulder, just like Jesus had done for him. And that's when Eli finally understood. The miracle was not only that Jesus helped a poor man, The real miracle was that Jesus changed Eli's heart, so Eli could help someone else. Maybe you've been feeling like Eli. Maybe you feel unseen. Maybe you're struggling financially. Maybe you're carrying pain that nobody knows about. Maybe you smile in front of people, but cry when you're alone. If that's you, please remember this. Jesus sees you. He sees the nights you cried. He sees the battles you never talk about. He sees the strength it takes for you to get out of bed every morning. And even when the world ignores you, you are not invisible to God. You may not have everything you want right now, but your story is not over. The chapter you're living in is not the final chapter. And sometimes, God sends help in a way you never expected. Through a person, through a conversation, through a small act of kindness, or sometimes, through the strength to keep going one more day. So if you're watching this right now, and you feel broken, don't give up. Keep walking, keep praying, keep believing. Because the same Jesus who stopped for a poor man on a crowded street still cares about the broken, the forgotten, and the people everyone else walks past. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs you to be the person who stops, the person who listens, the person who helps. Because sometimes, you don't need millions of dollars to change a life. Sometimes, all someone needs is for you to look at them and say, "You are not invisible. Jesus sees you." Your story is not over. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need hope today. And remember, Jesus is always near.